I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. 2023 was a whirlwind of a year for the UAP topic, with whistleblower David Grusch, the Schumer Amendment, otherwise known as the UAP Disclosure Act, and more. To help break this down, what could be on the horizon for 2024, we have the hosts of the UFO Thinker Podcast. I'm a big fan of these guys, joining us shortly. But first, do us a solid and hit the subscribe and thumbs up button on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at Good Trouble Show and all other social media platforms at The Good Trouble Show. Leave a comment, share, like, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. All those things encourage these platforms, as we always say, to spread the word about our show to the masses. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for The Good Trouble Show, subscribe, leave a review, hopefully a good one. And and we're a little bit behind on the podcasts, posting the podcasts, so we will catch up on that as soon as we can. We also need your help keeping the lights on. You can become a supporter of the Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And basically, for the price of buying me a Starbucks coffee or whatever your coffee chain is in your country, you can help support our show. Finally, on YouTube, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show your financial appreciation, your support. And I also want to thank our existing financial supporters on Patreon and on YouTube. And as always, I want to thank our Good Trouble mods for moderating the chat. We always appreciate that. You don't want unmoderated chat, because who knows what could happen there. Anyway, my next two guests are my British brothers from another mother, the hosts of one of my go-to podcasts, or a lot of really great ones out there, the UFO Thinker Podcast. Please. I think I've been muted this whole time.
Oh no, you just muted yourself, I think, for the last couple of words there.
Okay.
If what I'm hearing is what everybody else hears. So presumably you were saying hello to Dave and Frank. So
yes. Absolutely.
Well, it's very, very nice to be here. Thank you very much for the invite.
We're off to a smashing start. I can already tell that my microphone is popped off. So we had moved everything over to a new computer, and I realized as we were getting ready to go that one of the audio licenses didn't transfer. So it was a bit of a scramble. You know, we're a one-man show here, and of course, as always, the shit usually hits the fan in some way. Anyway, so in case I don't know what got muted, but anyway, so please welcome Frank and Dave from the UFO Thinker Podcast. So anyway, guys, welcome to the chaos. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. Yeah,
excellent.
Not too
Dave,
bad.
you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So,
good choice. I'm in the UFO Thinker safe house here, as for just in case.
There you go. Okay, cool. So, firstly, thanks for joining us. Like I said, I've been a fan of your show for quite some time. I love the in-depth thinking on this topic. I love the depth that you guys go to, and I of course always enjoy the banter between the two of you. I think you guys really have great chemistry. So Frank, how did the UFO Thinker Podcast come about? When did it start?
Well, it was like, I think, a few other sort of, I suppose I would describe as colleagues now, other podcasters. Had a similar experience, which was that we found ourselves with a bit of extra time to look into, the topic that many of us have been fascinated with for a long time. During lockdowns with the COVID situation, which sort of seems a long time ago now, but really it's relatively, it's sort of not that long really in the grand scheme of things. But I just found myself with a bit of extra time. I'd been interested in the topic sort of generally for, as long as I can remember, really, but never really had the chance to have that sort of deep dive. And I used to go for walks in a little woods sort of near to where I live. in the north of England. And one day that I was on one of those little walks, I thought to myself, I'll check out if there's any other UFO podcasts out there. Obviously, I didn't have a podcast on my own at that time. The thought never even crossed my mind. And I ended up discovering, as I suppose many people would have done back then, that UFO podcast with Andy McGrillen, and ended up becoming a regular listener of that podcast. Kind of gave me a lot of in points to good researchers and things like that, and a lot of good work that had already been done that I was oblivious to. And then ended up actually joining some of the call-ins that Andy did on the show. I don't think he does them as much now, but it used to be quite a regular thing. And having done that and enjoyed it, and I found that I was often watching documentaries and listening to pods and doing all my research of various types and making a lot of notes. And I decided that since I was enjoying doing the call-ins, why not do my own podcast sort of thing.
Excellent.
It all came about pretty quickly. Waking up one morning with this desire to do it, and then I think it was probably after I'd just been on a call-in with Andy on that UFO podcast, and by I think about 2 p.m. the same day, I had done the first episode and put it out, which you could probably tell if anybody ever goes back and listens to the first episode, because it was just a stream of consciousness, really. But then it just kind of went from there, really. People were like, I was astonished that one or two people actually tuned into that first episode, and then I was like, oh, might as well do another one. And since I've got 2 listeners, and then it just kind of grew and grew from there. And obviously here we are now. I don't even know. It's like 2.5, nearly 3 years later, and still doing it, and people are still listening. So I guess we must have been doing something right.
Yeah, I think this is like, I don't know what, maybe our 50th episode, and I'm astonished I get on the air half the time with the shit that goes wrong. Dave, how did you two meet? How did and you're not on the show all the time, right? Or are you?
No.
Every time I tune in, I seem to always hear you on there.
Yeah, I'm not on all the time. Frank does a lot. I mean, what Frank does is very impressive. Actually, he does a lot of monologues, which are really hard to do for an hour. But as the show started, I think in May of 21, me and Frank have been corresponding a bit because I've been listening to him, and so we were corresponding around December time, or maybe in November, and we were talking about a lot of the things we had an interest in, and about what we thought about what was going on behind the scenes, and we gelled quite well. So from that, we started to develop really got back into it after that. And then 2017, like a lot of us, everybody kicked off, and I decided in probably 2019 it was time to sort of step in the ring, as it were, and do some sort of low-level activism, really, which is what I view this as. People talk about stuff, trying to make sense of it in a sensible way, and, try and do some analysis and not just sit on the fence. And that's what we try to do, but we do a lot of talking behind the scenes about what we think, and that's really interesting. It's a really interesting process for me doing that.
Speaking of talking behind the scenes, for some reason our output keeps muting every now and then. So I'll try and keep an eye on that. Maybe, I don't know, Big Daddy Ronald Moultrie is messing with us here. So anyway, all right, yeah, great. Yeah, no, it's always interesting finding out how people tend to get into this. So, so I'm new to the UAP topic. I've only been doing this for about 2 years, and a lot of our viewers are new to this topic. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll throw this to both of you. Take us back to 2023 BG before Grusch, or kind of what led us in maybe a very compact way led us up to that point. If one of you guys want to take that.
Shall I give us a quick run through?
You go ahead, Dave. Let's have a...
Yeah, and I just won't be too long, but basically, interesting question is what kicked it all off. I mean, anyway, that didn't happen, and so a new group took over, TTSA, and what you can see since 2017, the picture come out in the New York Times, and basically we've seen since then a sort of factional fight behind the scenes to try and get transparency out. It's essentially Grusch came forward on the time of the first UAP hearing in May 22, but there's a lot of stuff before that. We had the New York Times, we had testimony, and then we had sort of a web-based stuff as well, and legislation finally. So that is a real quick run through, but we had this sort of contest through then. Then we had Grusch and the Disclosure Act. Grusch came forward, basically confirmed the core UAP story, and that was a real game changer. That was very hard to dismiss. Then we saw a fight back starting after the public congressional hearings. We saw a fight back starting, Grusch being attacked, Kirkpatrick come out fighting, and now we're seeing the current situation where we're waiting for the whistleblower fight back, as it were, to what's happened with the UAP Act being scuppered. Now, that's very quick, but the essential thing to understand is there's been a war behind the scenes between the two intelligence or government factions, the ones who want to keep it secret, the one at the in the nose, and the ones who want to try and reveal it, which are the sort of one and knows there. So you've got the in the nose and the one and knows. That's what's characterised this contest. And the big game changer was that Grusch came out and actually put a hole through, the sort of careful plans to try and keep it secret. I don't know if you want to fill in some of the blanks there, Frank.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just kind of take it back perhaps a little further, if you don't mind, as well. Do. Just as kind of a side point sort of thing, because you mentioned that, you're relatively to the topic, and I think I am as well, really, in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I was only... I kind of got interested in. Everybody's interested in this topic. If you just sat somebody down and said, "Look, have you ever considered that there might be life out there?" Everybody has thought about that at some stage in time. And I remember hearing, what would it have been now? 2000. I think it was mid 2017 that Tom DeLonge was on Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking back then about this kind of a lot. You know what I mean? Like, anybody who's heard that particular interview, he went into a lot of different areas in that interview. And me hearing that for the first time, and I'm going back a little bit further back here, a few years, sure. But I remember hearing that and thinking, I'm along the singer, the guitarist, and he's going down some strange avenues here, and I'm not sure I'm going down these avenues with him and this kind of thing. And then, of course, as Dave mentioned there, end of 2017, we had that New York Times article, which certainly made me and many others rethink the kinds of things we'd been hearing from Tom DeLonge on that Joe Rogan interview. And I think it was a bit of a kind of scattershot approach that some of the things that were being discussed on that particular interview anyway, but hearing it, the sorts of things that we discussed in that New York Times article certainly made you rethink certain things. Of course, we heard about like the all of the leaked emails that came out, the Podesta leaks, later down the line, verified a lot of what Tom DeLonge was actually saying, that sounded completely out there and off the wall. He was talking to very high level US government people, about the fact that, sorry, there's a digital watch alarm going off somewhere, and I'm not going to try and hunt for it to shut it down. It'll be gone in a second if you can hear that. Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly, the kind of crazy sounding things discussed when Tom DeLonge first came out, slowly but surely started to get more and more verified. And it became clear to a lot of people like myself, who was relatively new to a deep dive in the topic at that point, that actually there really is something to this. It would appear that there are some long-standing efforts within the US government to reverse engineer, recover first of all, and then reverse engineer, non-human vehicles, which is pretty mind-blowing. I always say this to Dave when we're talking, but when you look at this topic quite a lot, you can sometimes forget about the fact that that's what we're actually talking about here. It's one of the most mind-blowing. The weight of that there's potentially vehicles that are being, stored that are not human-made, and there's a secrecy around that, and it's being kept from the public is, it's a big injustice. But anyway, so obviously following on from that, we did see quite a few, big news stories and more kind of coming out in the years following. A big part of that was, Congress basically in the States becoming aware, of all of this that was going on, and gradually kind of starting to pass more legislation to basically require more information. And obviously we've had the various iterations of the US government's kind of UFO office along the way, which there's been that many of them at this point. I have to sort of think back, but there was originally the UAP task force, and then that eventually became the AOIMSG, and to what we have today, obviously with Arrow, which I'm sure we'll get to talking about at some stage. And it's been fascinating to see how all of this is unfolded. I mean, from my point of view, sort of jumping into the topic back then, and seeing the last few years unfold has been quite the journey. And I'm sure, obviously, if you've listened to the pod, you'll been on some of that journey with me as well. And many folks who are listening right now will be as well. So I know that was a bit in depth there, but hopefully that sort of answers the question that you were asking in terms of what happened before Grusch.
Dave, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I just think it's important to know this has happened a few times since the war, since the Second World War. People have come forward and they've always been squashed, but the difference this time was there's insiders from the IC, from the intelligence community and the DOD, and who really come forward who wanted to make this happen. And they finally got congressional backing, which was the other thing, because the whole strategy has been the only way to break this secrecy is to get the accountable body, which is the congressional thing. They're the only ones who got the power to break this open, and that's been the big thing. So little Elizondo's strategy was raise awareness and apply pressure. So he did it through podcasts, through UAP, for UAP media stuff, social media. They brought pilots in to testify to Congress people, and slowly but surely they applied that pressure. And out of that, we saw the legislation and crazy stuff. 2 pieces of massive legislation, setting up a whole UAP department to do it, which the DOD never did. Tried to head up for the past with rubbish alternatives, and all the time now we see they had no intention of doing it, or they just didn't know what to do because they've been outmaneuvered at every turn. And we had Sean Kirkpatrick, who everybody had a lot of hope in, actually turning out to be just somebody who was trying to dampen it down all the time. That's why I think Grusch was so important, what I was trying to get at earlier. There was thought he got it under control, and he came forward and spilled the beans, confirmed the narrative that we'd heard about roughly was true. Impeccable sources, had a lot of credibility. The IC, the Inspector General, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, confirmed his story, 40 witnesses. So any rational person knows that's not just hearsay. And that really broke through. And then he did the public hearings, and we all thought it was victory, certain touchdown, and then it all changed. And then the media went silent, and there was this big fight back then, which we're now seeing culminating in the UAP Act being scuppered. But that's what I mean. All the way along this, you can see this behind-the-scenes conflict. But I don't think the core group, or whatever, the secrecy group, whatever you want to call them, I don't think they've got many options, but they've committed criminal acts, and they're in a difficult position. So I think they've got a bunker mentality. And they're just sort of playing a version of whack-a-mole, really, and hoping it'll all turn out all right on the night. But I don't know whether there's many places for them to go. So it's very hard to read what's going to happen now. Because when you've got somebody with a bunker mentality, it's pretty hard to get them out of the bunker. And we're hoping that this revelation will bring him out. Another revelation will bring him out, and they just don't seem to react to it, really.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting, but it's been characterized by conflict. So anybody who thinks that we've had some sort of this is some smooth sort of kabuki play of disclosure, I don't think that's correct. I think it's been a hard fought and won battle, basically by one faction of the government to try. Now the question we'll come on to a bit later is why is that, and why have they chosen now to do it, and what are the different, which we can get into, I suppose, later on. But that's the thing with it, as Frank was outlining.
Yeah, speaking of bunker, I think Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was probably keeping the bunker door completely locked down, so no information came in. He spent a year inside the bunker doing jack shit. He never put anything on the website, which, by the way, that order came from Ronald Moultrie. That was why nothing was ever posted on the website. So Big Daddy Ronald Moultrie doing Ronald Moultrie type things. But yeah, I think, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but I think it was very clear that it was like, hear no evil, see no evil. If I'm not being briefed on anything, then I can truthfully say there's nothing, there's no alien life form or whatever it is that Kirkpatrick saw. So Frank, so David Grusch comes on the scene. Of course, the big sort of moment was his testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee, and following that, as we briefly spoke about, was the UAP Disclosure Act from Chuck Schumer. It was a groundbreaking piece of legislation. It was 63 pages of UFO legislation, 22 instances of non-human intelligence used, crash retrievals, biologics, all that kind of stuff. And I know, especially speaking for myself, and I think I'm not alone, all of us were really pinning a lot of hope on this UAPDA. Oh, and the other thing, of course, was establishing a UAP advisory board within the White House, which would have just absolutely been groundbreaking. So Mike Turner comes along, so it passes through Senate conference, and then Mike Turner comes along and just derails the whole thing. Frank, I know how disappointed I was and how much I felt that was a setback for the community. Frank, what is your read on that as far as what kind of impact that had? Have you heard anything in terms of, was there more to it than Mike Turner, and how big of a setback is this really, or is it just a bump in the road?
Well, the question of how big of a setback, I don't think we really can know that for sure yet, because we don't know the extent of the impact, and I think the knock-on effect of all of that is still yet to sort of be revealed. But I mean, in terms of the actual legislation, as I say, going back to sort of like 2017 and the years after that, the progress that was made there in terms of building awareness amongst Congress and getting the questions to be asked, basically culminated in the writing of the legislation in the NDAA for the last few years. And again, for me, I've really tried to get into as much detail as I can within, obviously, time restrictions and normal life and that kind of thing as well. But I've done some fairly deep dives into the legislation in previous years as well. And I remember even when I first started the podcast, some of the legislation was, people were really clinging on to like even the slightest mention of anything that sounded a bit anomalous. Going back a few years, there wasn't really that much to get excited about, and when there was anything to get excited about, it was kind of open-ended and that kind of thing. But obviously what ended up being in the legislation that was put forward most recently was completely different to that. I mean, it was stuff that I was reading it and thinking, I can't believe that these words are actually included, non-human intelligence and all the rest of it. Absolutely amazing to see. But one thing that I'd noticed in previous years, having gone through it in a fair bit of detail. I mean, I'm talking, I did like a 2-hour episode one time where I actually read through every single bit of legislation and pulled it apart and all the rest of it. And then I've been somewhat familiar with all the details from doing that. And then to see what actually made it into law in the end, you know, because obviously things get wrangled around and taken out and changed and whatnot. It wasn't entirely unexpected that there would be some changes, because there has been in previous years. And even when there's not been changes, even if things have actually made it into the final legislation, there's always a wriggle out attempt. So I didn't think that this was going to be, the minute the legislation gets signed in its intact form, there's going to be an immediate disclosure, everything's, you know, going to be made available to the public. It was never a case of that, but it definitely represented massive progress in terms of the direct nature of the wording in the legislation. And having seen the tweaks and things that had happened in previous years, I suppose everybody expected it to, you know, for the most part, to make it through intact, with a lot of the really important wording still in there, because it had been relatively smooth progress in the previous years from that point of view, other than kind of, like I say, minor tweaks and a fair bit of wriggling out of the actual requirements of the legislation afterwards. But the legislation itself usually flew through, you know. But this time, I think it's safe to say that definitely didn't happen, and it was fairly significant in terms of what was actually cut out, and as you say, some definite huge glaring question marks around the particular folks who were directly involved in the butchering of the language, and their pretty clear links to defence contractors. And yeah, I think it's pretty glaringly obvious that the folks that were most involved in taking out certain parts of the legislation were the ones with the strongest links, you know, to those defence contractors. And it's safe to say that's certainly a little bit more than just dodgy, you know. I don't know what anything you'd like to add on that, Dave?
No, I mean, they just nobble it every year, don't they, really? That's what they've done. And this one, they had to show the hand a bit more by rolling out Mike Turner. That was the thing. But for me, it's a bit thick, really, because this was a really careful, soft landing for disclosure. It was really well planned. They've been working on it since 22. Grusch had been writing it. And this was the way to do it. Slowly launch it out, talk it through. They had a panel of sociologists, you know, it was all laid out to do it in a slow sort of drop. And instead, which everybody could have got around the table and done that. And I'm sure deals could have been done, but no, they didn't want to do that. And so now they've thrown us into the Wild West, really, because there isn't a sensible way forward. And this is what the period we're in is now all about. Who's going to jump first? What article's going to come through? I think Kirkpatrick's tried to get his retaliation in first at the moment with all these crazy statements he said that seem irrational, really. Why would he do that? He's got away from the crime scene. He's come back to shoot a policeman, hasn't he? It's unbelievable. You know, so I can't understand it. But clearly they are still sticking to their guns because they mustn't think they've got anywhere to go. The thing is, it's all going to happen after the election. So they've done it for that, because I don't think Biden wants to launch. I think he supports it because Schumer wouldn't have done it otherwise. But he doesn't want to do it before the election, because historically any government that gives people bad news or uncertainty gets caned in the polls, and that will happen. It happened with the recession, happened with all sorts of things. So they thought, right, if all the dates are just after the election, so whoever wins, then they can start to deal with a clear wind at the back. And so it was all set up. And I think they were all banking on that. We can see it, the Sol Foundation, who were banking on it. But it's like you can do it the easy way, do it the hard way. And they've obviously chosen the hard way, haven't they? And hoping something turns up. That's what I think they're doing. But when you've got, it's just so badly handled and obvious. One thing that has come out is how close to control the media is. Went totally silent after the congressional hearings.
It's amazing.
There's been these terrible pieces coming out. A real, sort of rubbish pieces, not very well researched, attacks. And to silence the media, that's some feat that, and that wasn't supposed to happen after the Church Commission, but clearly they exert a lot of influence. Because any other story with this sort of evidence, be front page news, no rational person would doubt it, and the chattering classes have been talking about it all day, and there's nothing on this. It's like being in some sort of dream where you can't believe it's happening, but nobody's talking about it yet. And but I think that's correct. So it's what revelation will push us over the top. That's the question about the next things to come. And I think that's what the whistleblowers are thinking about. But also they're under criminal penalty or threat of criminal penalty. And that's the sort of game we're in. How far can they go without getting into serious trouble, and how far they're going to push it to the point where it doesn't matter legally? The congressional people will have to act at that point, and so they'll be forgiven for doing what they've done. It's on a bit of a knife edge, and we're just in the phony war period at the moment, I think.
It's truly amazing the amount of pushback that occurred after Dave, and as you said with Sean Kirkpatrick, that really blew me away. Now, when I had first heard about Kirkpatrick and started asking around, I can tell you literally everybody that I spoke with that had ever worked with him in the intelligence community, they had absolutely nothing good to say about this guy. He had been removed from just about every position. He essentially in the government just kept failing up. But just moreover, in my discussions with folks, and this is prior to him really coming on the stage as far as publicly, there literally was nothing good I heard about this guy, and of course I'm trying to be optimistic and all of that. So he gets in there, he just seems completely incompetent, and actually in his position he wasn't technically even supposed to be the director of a Pentagon program. I forget the rank he was, but he wasn't even supposed to be doing that. But the thing that I think really blew me away was after, I think everybody saw the writing on the wall that the guy was incompetent, was going to end up leaving Arrow or being forced out. But I think what really surprised me, and Dave, you spoke about this a little bit, was just how unhinged he became in this sort of press tour, which really, if you think about it, this whole thing with Sean Kirkpatrick in Unscientific American, it's all damage control. David Grusch called him out. He is a liar. We know that. Jeremy Corbell said it as well. He's been caught in all these lies. So Sean Kirkpatrick is going and essentially doing a sort of damage control tour. But Frank, what is your thinking in terms of why he did it? Why, and I'm sure he will continue to do it. Any thoughts on your end from across the pond as to why Kirkpatrick went down this route? He could have kept his mouth shut, gone off sailing into the nuclear sunset at whatever that lab he's at, but he chose to just be a jackass.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say what his exact motivations are and were, but it's definitely safe to say that there were some fairly big question marks around Kirkpatrick even when he first started in the role. I remember myself and Dave, we were talking about this on the podcast at the time, and whilst there was obviously kind of a wave of momentum, of optimism at that point, because we'd had these, like I've said, the previous years of legislation kind of getting more and more direct in terms of demanding answers, on this topic. There was a lot of optimism, I think, within people who had been following the topic at that stage, and some of that optimism obviously kind of sort of gave extra buoyance to Kirkpatrick's situation. But there were definitely some question marks even when he first started. I remember we picked up on a couple of comments that Lou Elizondo had mentioned at the time about Kirkpatrick, and he certainly wasn't glowing in his praise of him and whatnot. And then, of course, we ended up having very little going on for a long time. almost complete radio silence. I've described it as in the past. And then, of course, when he's ended up right at the end of his time, he's done this absolutely baffling article.
It's crazy.
Unscientific, un-American, perhaps you could say. It just doesn't seem. The thing is, he'd always tried to talk about how he wanted to have, an open-minded approach and follow the data. And there was this real strong commitment on paper as to doing that kind of thing. And so you would expect a completely thorough and rational scientific approach in terms of how he actually provides his kind of rationale for the conclusion that he's come to. But the baffling thing about it was the article that was put out in Scientific American really didn't have any of that whatsoever. It was basically just kind of dismissing anybody who didn't provide exactly the information that he wanted according to a really strict, sort of criteria. He was just describing people as like kind of crazy conspiracy theorists and things like that, which is like tabloid language that you would use if you're trying to minimize somebody's opinion, or the fact that somebody with a very credible background has been coming to your organization or attempting to and provide information. And of course we know some of the people that have done that, and they've not particularly had a warm welcome from Kirkpatrick's arrow. Just a real baffling article, kind of focusing in on just kind of name calling anybody that essentially are trying to present, information, despite them having very, very credible backgrounds, despite them providing detailed information, at least so we've heard. A complete dismissal of that, and no real attempt to back that up with the kind of scientific, analysis that you would expect, given that that's the outline approach that he said he was going to take. It seems like he's just kind of put his finger in his ears when anybody's come to him with any information, because he's already decided that there's nothing to it, And again, I've spoke about it quite a lot on my podcast, breaking down the language used in that article, and a very, very baffling kind of summary of things. Any thoughts from yourself, Dave?
Yeah, well, I think he'd do a rattled. I think he was ordered to do this. I don't think he would have done it otherwise. I mean, I think they were rattled. You know what? Maybe coming up in Grusch's op-ed, maybe Lou's book. And I do think they're trying to get the retaliation in first, as I say, because they're worried about why else would they have ordered him to destroy his reputation and make such stupid claims? I mean, he's following the Green Street narrative, that crazy Looney Tunes thing. And they did it before with the low information zone, when they did the Lowland Army thing at the May 22 thing with, what's his name, Bray and Moultrie. We don't know anything, and low information zone. And they have a history of borrowing things. But I wonder if that showed this narrative has been pre-prepared, but it's not really working. But yeah, so he followed the Green Street narrative. I can't really understand it. I mean, if you look at what Oversight did in 2 years, they had a fantastic progress. They were ready to go. They followed a great method. He did absolutely nothing. I mean, he just didn't even get out of his office, So he didn't use a proper intelligence methodology of an unknown threat, where you don't know everything, but you assess the threat and what you've got. It was just a complete joke what he did, and he sort of proved all that. And as I say, the only thing I can think is really around desperation. But it's interesting how these narratives keep getting thrown up out of desperation, as I say, and you do wonder where they come from, really. But I mean, surely he wouldn't have done that. He's not so big of a kid as to have done that voluntarily. He won't have been out of a fence. Somebody's told him to get out there and do it, but he couldn't even manage that properly, could he? He did it with the finesse, I don't know, of a raging elephant in a china shop. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not great, is he? He's not really a competent agent. I wouldn't, it's like Johnny English.
Who's Johnny English?
No, sorry, he's a rubbish. It's Ronak. I think Ronak is a plays. He's rubbish British agent. He might not be something like that. And he's like a rubbish James Bond who destroys everything that he tries to do in the intelligence field. So yeah, sorry, yeah, but yeah, he's pretty calculated.
Sounds like a perfect description of Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, he went to the Stephen Greenstreet School
Yeah.
of Media Relations and how to just make up crazy shit.
Yeah.
And, and the thing that was so nuts about it is so after he's out of Arrow and he starts going on this damage control because basically David Grusch exposed him for the jackass that he is. So he adopts all these crazy Stephen Greenstreet spooky conspiracy theories, and it just it just literally makes no sense. Now, one thing that I would pose to both of you guys, so someone like him. So one of the things that I was told about a while back about how they incentivize people to keep their mouths shut about the program or whatever is you're basically, if you exit out of the program or anything related to it and it's part of your portfolio, part of how they keep you quiet and not having loose lips is to promise you a cush job after that assignment. So I think in this case it was probably this not Lawrence Livermore, the other nuclear place, but we know from the photos that we've seen of Kirkpatrick when he was all dolled up at these different things, Susan Go was right behind him. And I noticed that somebody on Twitter, and I don't remember who, was at this thing, and he had tweeted that he had noticed that Go was like on him to make sure he didn't he didn't say the wrong thing. But here's where I'm going with this in a long-winded way. I guarantee you, and I could be absolutely wrong, but I almost guarantee you Sean Kirkpatrick had to go through a DOPSR approval process prior to running his mouth when he left Arrow so that he didn't say anything that constituted an unauthorized disclosure that would have thrown him in the slammer. And we know how long DOPSR has taken Lou, how long DOPSR, the process took for Grusch. So how far in advance did Sean Kirkpatrick have to get all this stuff cleared before he went running his mouth? Frank, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's actually something I've been thinking about myself recently as well. And what's for sure is that Sean Kirkpatrick did have his article approved for release through DOPSR. And I know that for an absolute fact. And the thing is, that does actually bring up some questions. Now, the thing is that obviously that is an article, and if you compare that to the DOPSR process for authorizing the publication of a whole book, for example, like when Lekatsky has had his books with NAP, it's been quite a lengthy process that can take sort of like, I think, 1.5 years, if I remember correctly from what George Knapp had said. It takes a long time to get those books through that process. And David Grusch has obviously had various things that he has had approved for release as well. And Lou Elizondo, I think, is currently having his book through that process. Now, obviously, those things have taken a long time. Kirkpatrick's article may have not taken as long, but I think there are some question marks around that, because if he has had the article authorized for publication in advance, at what stage did he actually put that DOPSR application, start the process? Exactly. At what stage did he actually do that? Because if he did that, let's say, a couple of months before he actually left the position, how was he so sure as well to have those absolutely, crystal clear sort of statements in there that, this is all just kind of conspiracy lunatics and things like that? How has he been able to actually have all of that in such detail, in those very, very clear terms, in an article, in a final draft stage to submit to DOPSR, when he's still got work to do? Surely if he's really going at it hammer and tongs to follow up every single lead. You'd wait till you've done all the work first and that kind of thing. But it would appear that he has had that article in that DOPSA process in advance. Of course, the other thing is, if that was a very, very quick process, in terms of, he was managed to get it turned around in a week or so, then that sort of also suggests some kind of preferential treatment, perhaps, as well. Why are they dragging their feet so much when it comes to authorising things for Grusch to say, but they're only too keen to get things pushed through the system very quick when it's Kirkpatrick? So I think that is perhaps a little bit worrying as well. But I think what all of this points to, I can't remember if it was yourself or Dave just now that referred to it as desperation, but there does seem to be a little bit of that going on, or at least a very much increased attention to managing the narrative and trying to be more proactive, I think, than ever before. Whenever anything happens, there always seems to be an article, locked and loaded, ready to go out, either before to preempt something happening, or right after. And, I mean, look, there are certain angles in this topic that are a little bit conspiratorial. And when I heard about Susan Go, however you want to say it, having been involved in directing certain things that Kirkpatrick was saying and whatnot, even I was a bit like, maybe that's a little bit of a conspiracy. But then obviously when I've actually seen those pictures that you're talking about, where Kirkpatrick has literally been, followed around by Susan Goff at some of these events and things like that, it certainly suggests, at the very least, a close cooperation and, a cooperation in terms of discussing what's going to be said and at what stage and that kind of thing. And it really does open up some significant questions, I think, as to how deep that actually goes. But I don't know if you've got anything to add, Matt or Dave.
Yeah, for sure. It was funny about those photos too. So Sean Kirkpatrick looks, is all like dressed up, but then Susan Go looks like she just rolled out of Planet Fitness with her freaking sweatpants on and her clipboard and all of that. It's interesting. I was while you were chatting, Frank, I was looking earlier at the chat when I brought up Green Street, and I think some people in the chat referred to him as Goon Street. I call him a few other things, but it was interesting. Somebody, before you even mentioned this, Christian Morales said, "Oh, looks like we lost him." Christian Morales said, "Green Street blocked me after." There you go. There you're back. So I'll start that again. Christian Morales said, "Green Street blocked me after being polite and having an honest debate, and I debunked what he claimed to bunk on the thread. He got black." Actually, no, sorry. It was before that. Catkin said this. Green Street is starting to sound a little frantic at times. I think he and other debunker skeptics have had an easy ride for a long time, and until now. And I think I mentioned this on. I forgot who I mentioned this to, but either tomorrow or Tuesday, I'm releasing a fairly lengthy, we'll just call it a video op-ed addressing the debunkers. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the United States government lying to the American people, history of the United States government buying off journalists, buying off media people, not to write stories for foreign consumption, but to write stories for domestic consumption, and how wrong that is. And in my opinion, that is continuing to this day. So Dave, speaking of which, it seemed to me after Kirkpatrick, the legislation going down, would you agree, Dave, there has to be a very coordinated network or campaign or whatever of journalists, debunkers on Twitter. Like when I step back and look at it, and I'm going to talk about this in my sort of op-ed, the messaging is so precise. You spoke a little bit about it with Kirkpatrick and Green Street. What do you think about all that? Am I reading too much into it, or do you think that there is something afoot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see it quite clearly. You can see there's a lot on Twitter, the same messaging. You can see a lot of these tame journalists doing it. And also on Twitter itself, you can see, I think there's a lot of people who are, counterintelligence people or whatever they call them, who are sending out messaging as well. And I also think they're probably getting a lot of the people who are the debunkers. And the trick is to get the debunkers to do it without knowing they've been turned, as it were. They probably pick people who they know agree with this anyway, or whatever, got various issues, get in their circle of friends, and then there they go. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of that. But it's clearly quite well coordinated, but they're a bit useless as well, aren't they? I mean, so it's not a smooth operation. And they've been caught on the hop a lot of the time. They've been playing catch-up, so it's a little bit clunky. I think the best part of it is what they do on Twitter. I think it gets a bit worse in some, and the press isn't too bad, but it's a little see-through. And then the debunkers are pretty rubbish. And Kirkpatrick's performance was dreadful. So I think it's, as counterintelligence operations go, it's not too good, but it's definitely coordinated. The biggest question of all, though, is why has the DOD not said anything? Why have they just not denied it? That's the biggest thing. Why has the media not asked that question? Surely that would have been, if they just saw it's a lot of rubbish, and that would have been the end of it. But they haven't done that. They've never contradicted Grusch. There's clearly a massive thing there, and nobody sought to ask that question. So there seems to be very little accountability for the DOD by the press or even by the government itself, I mean, just to get back, I wonder how Grusch is supposed to be writing this UAP history. How has he been allowed to do that? He showed himself to be totally unobjective, totally unprofessional. He's already made his mind up, and he's supposed to be writing on behalf of the Comptroller General an objective piece that identifies all the misinformation, all what's happened. And he's just going to say, oh, nothing happened. I've investigated, nothing happened. And his version of investigation is ringing up the intelligence community saying, did you do anything wrong? They say, no, we didn't, Sean. He said, well, that's good enough for me. And that's right, his investigation, isn't it? That's the honour system, as he called it. There's not much honour in that for me in terms of the American people. But the point is, how is he being allowed to? Because I think that could come out, and then the mainstream press will say, oh, yeah, well, look, Sean sold, there's nothing here. So I think that's a key thing that he must be stopped on doing. But generally speaking, I do think it's coordinated, but I don't think it's coordinated with a brilliant purpose. And that's why I use the example of whack-a-mole. It's sort of reactive sort of thing. It's not, they haven't got a game plan, whereas the transparency team have. They have got a game plan, and they gradually funnel them towards the exit where they haven't got many more options. That's what I think's happening here. And I don't want to be too optimistic, and I know there's a lot of things can happen, but they're gradually getting pushed into a corner. But anyway, so I don't know if that answers what you're saying there, Matt, but that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, just to, sorry, if you don't mind, Matt,
please.
just for a second, just very quickly, to be clear, it's Kirkpatrick, I think, who was in charge of writing that historical report. I think you may have mentioned Grusch was writing it there, Dave. It might have been a slip.
What did I say that?
He should be writing it. He should have been writing
just to be absolutely clear.
Wow.
But I think actually, quite interestingly as well, that's another example. I think in the original legislation, it was supposed to be the Comptroller General that were writing that report, but that ended up being watered down to it was going to be done by the Director of Arrow under Super Comptroller General, quite significant as well. But I mean, just going back to that, the plan and what kind of attempts to manipulate narratives are actually taking place. I don't think for a long time that's been even really a concern that needed to be addressed particularly directly. Obviously, as we know, or at least if you've looked into it, there have been direct attempts to shape the public's perception of this topic in the past, creating stigma and all that kind of thing. But really, especially the public, the wider public who are not focused on this topic, I think there has to be, a figurehead as such. And the closest that I suppose you could have got was people like Bob Lazar in the past, who came out, obviously made an absolutely massive splash across the mainstream sort of public. And the beauty of somebody like Bob Lazar, from the point of view of if you're a secret keeper trying to keep the greatest secret ever to have been kept from the public who are desperate. The beauty of somebody like Lazar is there are a lot of question marks about him. There are things that can't really be verified very easily about whether he did what he said he did, and it's quite easy for them to brush that off put a few things out there to discredit him, and that's it, kind of end of story. I think that changed pretty significantly when you had Lou Elizondo, especially Lou Elizondo coming forward with a verifiable background. Obviously, there are people that question certain aspects of that, but for me, I think it's beyond any question at this point.
I think we might be losing your connection a little bit. Oh, there we go. Now we're back.
Are we back?
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the credibility of Lou Elizondo and his verifiable background was the thing that made a very big difference there. And following on from that, Dave Grusch takes that even a step further and has got an absolutely impeccable record verified by various people, and that really does create a problem. You can't brush that off very easily like you could with some of the people who've come out in the past, like your Lazars and that kind of thing. And I think there has to be a coordinated effort to manage that narrative from the point of view of the folks who do want to keep this a secret. Now, when we talk about the extent of what is being kept secret, that is a very interesting discussion, which can go on for hours and hours in and of itself. But is there things that are known about by certain parts of the US government, military, and intelligence community that is much further than what the public know? Absolutely. There's absolutely no question about that. And is there an effort to manage what the public are able to know and perhaps to flavour certain things in terms of discrediting certain people? I think it's safe to assume that is the case, and I think we're seeing a ramped up version of that recently as a result of the credibility of people like Lou Elizondo, and then Grusch taking that even a step further. And it does look as though they've kind of gone in all guns blazing to change, to basically keep control of that narrative when there's people with such a credible background like Grusch coming forward that directly threatens the narrative that they're trying to put forward. If that 100%.
Yeah, because they end up not having any control of it because they've been doing all this shady shit for 80 years, and you've got Grusch, you've got Lou, who have impeccable credentials despite what these debunkers will latch onto or obsess about. Don't get me started on that. But speaking of bonkers, Dave, isn't it completely bonkers that Sean Kirkpatrick is going to be a non-paid advisor to Arrow? What is that about? And do we need to worry about the effect he's going to have on Arrow moving forward?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. I can't believe I said Grusch was writing that report instead of Kirkpatrick. I've already got 2 offers from the deep state to join their crew now after having said that. But that comes back to the point I was making before. He's so discredited, he can't be an unpaid advisor. They've got to disown him. Where's the accountability in the organisation? What's the Deputy Defence Secretary doing? Why is nobody saying, what are we doing here? It seems like there's a little enclave within this who are very powerful, who can't be gainsaid. And you've got to ask who they are, because because in any other thing, they'd be kicked out of office, they wouldn't be using him. I know in the UK, his reputation would be totally shredded. You couldn't have had somebody as discredited as him still be even being connected to it in any way. So to me, I don't know. It just seems that they're acting in ways with a lot of political systems. It relies on precedence, people doing the right thing and all the rest of it. But these people aren't doing the right thing, and they're just being what we would say is hard-faced. They're just going, well, we're just staying there as long as we can. And so I think there needs to be a real step up, and that's why maybe the Congress will do something a bit more seriously with select committees or some more formal levers of power and accountability to start to bring the DOD and the other people to heel, because this is just not acceptable. There's no way to run a railroad having him still connected after what he said. He's just not an objective person. Apart from not doing his job properly, his conduct alone should have ruled him out, and they should have been out on the media saying, we're sorry about this, we disown him, and none of that has happened. And I think that makes them all complicit, and it's almost like a conspiracy, and I wondered if at some point they might look at the RICO stuff and all of that around conspiracy if fraud comes into the play as well. It'd be quite interesting to see that, and what immunity they have from that.
I would say that fraud and criminal activity is probably fairly rampant in this whole subject matter in terms of the government, the CIA, certainly what Chris Sharp, myself, and Josh uncovered in the Daily Mail with the CIA and the Office of Global Access, and how the kind of shady stuff that's been going on there for a very long time. It literally just boggles the mind. And we interviewed, I think it was like 2 or 3 people that went and testified to AARO on this show out of the nuclear end of it. And every single one of them, especially one nuclear launch control officer named David Schindley, who had his Minuteman squadron disabled by UAP, as a generalization, they described the whole AARO interview and interactions with Sean Kirkpatrick as a basic clown show. It was incompetent. Schindley, for instance, he had mentioned, and I've seen the email. We couldn't publish it, but Sean Kirkpatrick sends out this email to all the nuclear people asking them to come in and testify, but he sends the wrong email. He sends an email regarding if you were part of a special access program, and it was giving details on how the skiff would be handled and all of that. So this incompetent guy sends out the wrong email to a whole host of people. And so they come back and they say, hey, look, we're not that group of people. And then I think David had emailed Kirkpatrick and said, okay, great. When is the interview? And somebody replies to the email and gives them the time and the date, but doesn't give them the time zone. And they had to hammer AARO asking them, what time zone, what time zone, what time zone. It was just a train wreck. And then on top of that, every single person that I spoke to that interviewed with AARO, whoever was conducting the interview, and Kirkpatrick wasn't on all of them, they were taking notes. They weren't recording anything. There was no court stenographer, anything like that to take an official record. It was literally as if they were just kind of going through the motions. And that was something that one of the people, I don't remember who, characterized it as far as how they felt in their testimony to AARO. Anyway, Sean McQuadcopter, whatever, Kirk Quadcopter, I think I coined that phrase, with a doctorate in droneology. Hopefully he goes away. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about something fun like Soul. The Soul Foundation, man, that was awesome. I was only there for the second day. I wasn't available to come on the first day. I did some helping I helped out on the edit for some of the videos. It was a very long process. There was a lot of footage. I edited one video, but there were 2 other people, and I'm bad about recalling names. They did the lion's share of the work, and they did a really great job. So the Carl Nell video was the video I had edited. And I can tell you, I have not gone through and watched all of the Soul videos. I don't know about you guys, but Frank, what was the highlight of whatever Soul video you had? And then Dave, I'll put the same question to you.
So first of all, just generally in terms of the work.
Yep, I think we're losing his thing, losing his connection. Dave, we'll hand it off to you. Well, your connection's kind of dropping on and off there. So let me pass it to Dave real quick, and we'll get us started. Oh, there he goes.
Yeah. I think Carl Nell was my obviously key one, talking about critical disclosure. That was a big one. But the guy, I can't remember his name, the sort of geopolitical or whatever, or sociologist or whatever, who, not the co-founder, the guy who talked about the risk as well. That was a brilliant talk about the different levels of risk. I think you talked about that, Matt, a bit ago, about how good that was, about the different ways disclosure could play and the impacts on society. That was really good. I thought Diana Pasulka was very interesting because she's got a slightly different methodology and some of the tools she brings to bear about what it is and that working together. That was very good. My overall impression, though, was it was very, you could see what they try to do. They try to set up an alternative organisation that can support disclosure. And that's what we probably need, these civil organisations that are sort of quasi-governmental, linked to academia, that can pick up the mantle in the sort of wave of when disclosure happens, really, or some kind of disclosure. And you could see the optimism they thought around the UAP Act, which is probably a bit less now. But it was very impressive how it, because in a way they didn't say much new, which I didn't mind. There was a few new things there. Carnell's was probably the newest thing. But it was more about it becoming acceptable to these sort of wider audiences. And, it coming to the business, to the mainstream and making it acceptable. So I thought it was really, really impactful. And I did think we can see these different organisations starting to set up now, which will run in parallel with them. I mean, you've got, what's his name? Danny, the lawyer,
Sheehan.
Famous guy. Danny Sheehan.
Right.
Their foundation as well, and that's from the political side. So you can see how these shadow organisations starting to set up and a bit of an infrastructure of disclosure trying to be created. I thought it was fantastic, and it's good to see these great minds and the vibe that come out of it as well. I mean, personally, I think the next one should be more open, because you run the risk of certain people in the community knowing more than others. And I know why they did that, so I'm not knocking that. But I think it needs to be open so we all know the information, you can have that conversation. And we probably need to think about the role of activists and the role of when this become, more academic and all the rest. There's a few issues to talk about, but I generally thought it was a real positive thing. And this idea of, I just thought it's all been blown out of the water when I saw what had happened with the UAP Act, what Carnell was talking about. It was massively impressive. God, you could put him in front of anybody and you'd be going, yeah, I agree. He's so impressive as a spokesperson. And he predicted this catastrophic disclosure, which he saw from enemies or maybe the others. But I think the catastrophic disclosure, the biggest risk now, is from the whistleblower side as people push the envelope on what they can say. And then we're in a very interesting ball game, as we said earlier, what's going to happen.
Frank, I think your connection is kind of dropping in and out. It looks right now like you're totally asleep. So I don't know if Dave bores you too much. I love listening. Hey, he fell asleep. He knocked his computer off the table.
Well, I am actually here. Can you hear me? Is that relatively smooth? I was thinking maybe if I leave the camera off, maybe I'll be with a better chance of staying.
Yeah. Actually, that's better. So Frank, I'm going to cut to you. And okay, so Frank, you've never looked better. So Frank, tell us about what you enjoyed about the Soul videos, whichever ones you were able to watch.
Yeah. So what I was starting off saying earlier before I was so rudely.
It's a tough crowd here.
Else it is that's on my tail. I'm only joking, of course. I don't overestimate my own importance that much. I think they actually would down. What I was going to say is that the Soul Foundation, I think, is an excellent initiative. Anticipating the coming out for quite a while. The main ones that I've been able to check out is the Carnell one, which I think is, as Dave was saying there, absolutely fascinating and a very interesting kind of weighing up as to how different types of disclosure could come about and the potential to like an unclosure and that kind of thing. In general, the Soul Foundation bringing together people high levels of expertise in different areas and academics, and trying to engage them with the topic. I think obviously, we all know Gary Nolan. I've spoken to Dr. Nolan on my podcast as well quite some time ago now. Actually, I think it would have been about a year and a half ago, and I think he's basically just thinking, if we can't rely on the government to bring people to
up there. I think you might be gone again. You there, Frank? Oh, maybe not.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. You cut out for a little bit. Now you're back.
Okay. Well, the NSA intern is doing a fantastic job.
I was actually just about to do because you guys have a Patreon thing, right? Nope, he's out. Yeah,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
I was gonna make a really corny joke for folks to please become subscribers on your Patreon, because clearly you need a little extra dough to keep the lights on. It's hard to do television appearances when you don't have any power in your thing. So just joking, of course, but actually not. It's all of these shows. They cost money to make. Time is valuable, all that. So we always encourage everyone to support everyone that is putting out good content, such as you folks. So next time you're on, you'll be able to turn the lights on. Actually, I'll tell you a very quick story. So. In Vegas, I was in Vegas working on a show. I work in television professionally, and had Danny Sheehan on. I was doing it from my hotel room on my day off, and literally halfway through the interview, my internet got knocked out. And not only did my internet get knocked out, my Bluetooth got turned off, and I didn't have my sort of studio set up, so I just had an earpod thing happen. It was either 2 or 3 other times, but this is actually crazy. So I think it was about 2 weeks ago. Some friends of mine from the political world have a podcast that has nothing to do with UAP, UFO, anything at all. They normally just talk about politics, things like that. They had invited me to come on as a guest, and to talk about the UAP issue. Right at the tail end, as I'm railing on probably the CIA and railing on Moultrie, the podcast goes completely dead, gets knocked off the air. And I'm thinking it's something at my end, and I immediately get a text from one of the hosts that said, "You're not going to believe this. We were shooting the podcast on 2 iPhones that were plugged in. When we started the show, they had the charging icon. Both iPhones immediately dropped to 0 and went off the air at exactly the same time." And I said, "Yeah, it's probably Ronald Moultrie doing his crazy stuff." Anyway, I digress. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there is something to that. See, there's been a lot of people overdoing it over the years, thinking every bit of interference is the intelligence community. But I watched that thing with you and Danny Sheehan, and I've seen a few things, and I do think there's some level of interference going on with these, because it happens too frequently at key moments as well. That story you told, when you're in the bar at that hotel with those people shouting across you, who obviously I see, that was really quite chilling, that story you told as well. I found that real, and it just shows you they are monitoring these things. Yeah. I mean, and it must be very irritating for them, because what's being said, we're saying loads of stuff, on Twitter or whatever, and it's causing a lot of problems, because it puts pressure on with the politicians and other people, or staffers, or people who hear it. And it's very difficult for them to control. I don't think they quite know what to do. Because particularly with Grusch, because he's sort of the vaulter, isn't he? He's the person, he's like the poster boy, the people we always wanted, the person we always wanted but never thought we'd have is Grusch. And yet he's been so brave as to come forward, because who would have thought anybody would be that brave to do that? And he's done it. And so now they're a bit stuffed, and so I definitely think there's some. It happens too frequently, and that stuff for you with Danny was crazy, because you had everything going, and everything was being systematically knocked out. And I remember watching it and thinking, my God, there's something to this. Anyway, but again, I digress now, Matt.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Well, and what was funny too was when the article came out in the Daily Mail. That was when I actually flew to Vegas to start this other project. There goes Frank, and some allies in the intelligence community had advised all three of us to be very, very careful and be not even by ourselves utter the names of the sources, anything like that, and just be conscious of your surroundings. And then running into that guy that was just the most bizarre thing. And then after that, of course, I was definitely on alert. So Dave, before we went on the air, you spoke a little bit about what you termed as the 4 stages of disclosure.
Yeah.
Walk us through what you think that is.
Yeah, well, it's just a way of thinking about whether we do ever get what we talk about when we say disclosure, because it's been kicked around so much as a concept. But what do we actually mean? And myself and Frank come up with a sort of framework to help us talk about it. Now, we're not saying it's correct or anything. It was just an idea to help us understand where we will get to under this. It's like a hierarchy of things. So the first one is what you might call confirmation, where they say, yeah, they are flying around. We've seen them. Yes. And we sort of had that sort of. The next stage of disclosure will be where they confirm they've got craft and perhaps bodies and say, yeah, we have recovered these, we've got them. The next one will be say, yes, well, we have a communication with some of these other races or whatever they are. And the final one will be what you might call context, where the government comes clean on the sort of nature of reality, the relationship, what they want, what is our relationship in the universe, all those big core secrets. And if you think about that, you've got, because that is what the question is how far would the government ever go in that scale? And I thought, and myself and Frank thought, at best we get to 1.5, perhaps, something like that. Maybe confirmation and a bit of talk about the crap, but Grusch come along and seemed to punch a big hole through all that and got us to maybe 2.5. He confirmed it. He talks about craft and bodies, talks about communications, talks about a lot of stuff. So it's a very interesting concept. Now, so firstly, how far, it might be interesting to hear you two guys, what do you think of that and how far will we get? And the other question is, all the people on the disclosure train now are in the DOD and the ICU, are part of the establishment, but want transparency. How far do they want to go? How far is it safe to go? How far is it in the national interest to go? You might admit to craft, would you want to talk about communication or context? Is there something you don't want people to know? Is it going to cause panic? So that's another question for the other side, the community. Where do we think disclosure should stop or land? And that's part of this partial disclosure model of Nell's as well, I thought, implicit in that model. Not that he borrowed this or anything, but, that was sort of, so it's a really good can opener, this model, not that it's that complex, to start to think about these issues and where we go with disclosure and what it means.
I agree. Frank, you there?
I appear to be here.
All right, cool.
At least for the time being. We'll see how we get on.
Yeah, we know OUSDI INS's cyber warfare program is strong among them. So let's talk about our good friend Chris Sharp. He's a friend of the show. I swear I've made so many friends across the pond. I told my wife recently I'm ready to come to the UK so I can meet all of you in person. And Frank, if your internet goes out again, I would maybe suggest rebooting your computer. But hopefully it will not. So anyway, let me see. Go to, sorry, I'm a little behind here. Okay, here we go. So Chris Sharp just dropped this, probably just before we went on air. European Parliament member advocates for unified approach to unidentified anomalous phenomena in new space law, which sounds pretty cool. I'm going to read some of the highlights here. So firstly, if anyone that is watching this show, if you are not following Christopher Sharp's journalism at the Liberation Times, he, Mark von Rennenkamp, Ross Coulthart, these folks are actually doing the work that journalists, the mainstream journalists, need to be doing, but they are asleep at the wheel, or they're lining their pockets and being told not to talk about it. But follow Chris Sharp, and he is doing this for all the right reasons. He's a personal friend, and man, he's just a awesome journalist. Anyway, so a member of the European Parliament, Francisco Guerrero, has urged the European Union to gather and evaluate data concerning unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So his remarks delivered during the European Parliament's plenary session on February 5th coincide with the development of a new European space law. Guerrero stated regarding the space law, quote, "In the security pillar, there is a gap that needs to be filled. Currently, the EU doesn't have a harmonizing scientific system to report UAP. This topic, which is a serious issue, needs to be addressed and is being dealt with the utmost importance in other countries." He added, "It is fundamental that EU Commission includes in the European space law a program to collect data on UAPs, as well as a scientific body to analyze these events in a very public way." So maybe, because I've always asked Chris, it seems like the UK and Europe, with maybe the exception of France, tends to be pretty mum about this. It sounds like this is a pretty good sign that things may be moving. Frank, since you've got the lights back on, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I appear to be up and running again. I've no idea what's going on. Apologies to the technical difficulties there that I appear to be having at this present moment. I've no idea what it is. I mean, I have a really good MacBook, top spec. My internet connection is fine. I've been doing a speed check, so I don't know what it was. But anyway.
Big Daddy Ronald Wolfie.
Yeah. Exactly, who knows? But yeah, first of all, Chris Sharp, had done incredible work. I've been very lucky to speak to Chris on my pod quite a few times now over the last couple of years. Just trying to cast my mind back, I don't think I've actually met Chris in person yet, even though I've spoken to him so many times. So I think that's on the cards for this year. I'm going to be spending a bit of time in London, so I'm planning on doing just that. And I hope Chris continues to do his excellent work covering this topic, as well as some of those other journalists that you mentioned as well. Definitely people that everybody should go and check out. But yeah, I mean, in terms of more engagement with the UFO topic, in Europe and in the UK specifically, something that many people have been pushing for quite some time, and we've been wondering when we might start to see the early signs of that actually happening. Obviously, there has been an aspect to this where I think the UK are clearly involved and have been for quite a long time, and have been closely working with our kind of special relationship partner, the US. But just for whatever reason, the UK is kind of refusing to acknowledge that. I've done a little bit of work in the past with FOIA requests, or the equivalent of here in the UK, to actually try and find any paper trail, as it were, of communication between the UK MOD and whatever the equivalent section of that is that is the equivalent of ATIP and ORSAP and that kind of thing, and there's absolutely nothing that you can get them to reveal in any way, shape or form, even though there clearly will be. I mean, it absolutely stands to reason that if you're the US and you have these official programs looking into the UFO topic, you're obviously going to have to communicate with your allies, especially your closest ally.
Of course.
So it's absolutely clear that there will be part of the UK, as I say, MOD that are actually collaborating with the US and other allies, but just no acknowledgement of that whatsoever, and no kind of signs of any improvement in that area until perhaps this. So I certainly think it's an encouraging sign that we might be starting to see some progress in that area. I don't know if Dave's got anything to add.
Well, historically, the cloak of secrecy was around NATO and the allies, or the loosely, what you might say, the allies, the sort of West and whatever, and the allies in Asia. They kept it secret, and I think the US led that. There seems to be a lot of evidence of that. The UK has been bang at it with the US for ages. Larry Maguire talks about the Five Eyes, so we know all about that. So internationally, I think the US has sort of kept a lid on it, not through coercion. I think the other states didn't know what to do either way, but they have led that and said this needs to be kept secret. Now, that's changing now. We saw the move through the UN, which Lou Elizondo set up, because I think this is where this will get sorted out, the UN, in the end, if we take a unified approach to it. And that was to put pressure on the US, in my view, to come clean. And now we're seeing the EU, which is analogous to the US in terms of its sort of size and its muscle and how it works. You're now seeing some pressure coming through from them as well. And maybe, because they know about this, there's quite a lot of interest in France and Italy and a few other countries. And this is a space law, and now they're asking the question: is data being collected? And they've been asleep at the wheel in Europe, really, on this, and it's not really been thought of. And it tends to, oh no, we don't talk about that because it's a lot more advanced in the US than it is, over the pond, as it were. But I think this is really significant that this question is being asked now, and it might signal a change from it being a sort of military-led, intelligence-led sort of cover-up between the allies. And you're seeing political forces getting involved in the EU, and that's a very interesting development. And as I say, the UN is the obvious way to sort this out because it's traditionally been the sort of a pressure valve. Everybody ignores it normally, but when there's a big problem, everybody pretends it's important and gets around that table and sorts it out. And I think if this issue, we do get disclosure, there's going to have to be a lot of conversations about what that means, what it means for the nuclear threat, what it means for world stability and all those other things, economics. And the UN, I think, is a way to go, which is, so I think, so it means the political setup is now starting to come in centre stage, and NATO maybe, and that military sort of IC secrecy blanket is maybe slowly being challenged a little bit. It's very interesting anyway.
Absolutely. And continuing with Chris Sharp, Chris Sharp is on fire right now. He had yet another article that came out. Future Representative Mike Turner in question after rare public statement on national security threat, later deemed underwhelming, amid continued dismissal of UFOs despite growing alarm in Congress. Now, that aspect of it, I think kind of Mike Turner, I'm sort of sick of hearing about him, but this was interesting in his article, which I think is the most what's the word I'm looking for? Relevant part. So Chris had this quote in here: on February 14th, 2024, Republican members of Congress were briefed by Lou Elizondo, the former director of a government program focused on UAP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which he was head of. Mr. Greenstreet. He continues on here. Sources have revealed to Liberation Times that Elizondo was joined by a former member of the UAP task force and decorated uniformed military officer, a former military fighter pilot, and eyewitness to a UAP sighting, a former DARPA scientist and a former political advisor within the Obama administration. Sources close to the Liberation Times revealed that attendees left the session deeply concerned about the inability to openly discuss the national security implications of UAP within the government due to classified constraints. So, Frank, clearly Mr. Elizondo is well in the game and keeping the ball moving.
Absolutely. It's always good to hear that doing what he can.
Yep, there we go. Oh, he's gone. All right. Dave.
Do you want to pick up the baton, as it were?
Yeah, pick it up, please.
I think with Mike Turner, in this article, I know Chris pretty well, actually. I do some work with him. He often talks to me about some of the articles. He does all the heavy lifting. I'm not trying to say that, but we talk about some of the articles, what the state of plays and the rest of it. And he's done half work hard, and he's really committed. He's a brilliant analyst, Chris. People don't quite realise how good his analysis is, and he's a very good political analyst, which he does as part of his job. And that's quite important. Anyway, so Chris Sharp, I've got so much time for him. Well, Mike Turner looks a bit of an idiot here, didn't he? Because he's there. There's a whole fleet of of ships, a man armada flying across the US, which he says don't worry about, it's irrelevant, from an unknown civilization. Yet there's talk of the Russians maybe putting something up into space, and he sort of, goes mad about it and tries to basically, the rumour is, try and feather his sponsor's nest in the arms community by making a big deal out of it. But he did get criticised, and obviously he got criticised by not being transparent on the UAP issue. And a lot of his colleagues did have this briefing from Lou Elizondo, which is crazy. He apparently confirmed it was to a conservative Republican group, and I wondered if Lou was doing that and I'm sure Lou wouldn't think of doing this, but maybe he was doing it to sort of undermine Turner's Republican support. With some of the people he has support in both houses, particularly the Congress people, to back future stuff. But Lou had confirmed Grusch's story. He actually showed pictures, apparently, of the craft and really made a big thing where they're thinking of setting up hearings now. But the question is, Matt, who do we think was in the room?
Right.
Was it Pedestra? Was it Putoff? Was it Carnell? Was it Jay Stratton? Was it Ryan? Is it Ryan Graves? Yeah, sorry, I just couldn't remember, blanked on his name then. Lou must have had a pretty all-star cast there, and he only had 20 minutes. And he actually showed them pictures, and they all come out really shocked. So in a way, Mike Turner both, looked a hypocrite. And actually, it was a great juxtaposition of what he was doing and what actually Lou was doing. And clearly, Lou's bang at it behind the scenes. And I think targeting maybe Turner's support. I mean, God, that's amazing. What I think to have that effect on the politicians, I thought it was really, really impressive. And again, Chris, he's writing all these articles left, right, and centre about highlighting all these different issues, and very successfully. Unlike the mainstream media, who haven't got a clue. Chris is doing single-handedly what they should be doing en masse.
Yeah, for sure. And I can tell you from one of my sources that was at this meeting, it wasn't 20 minutes; it was way longer. And right. I can tell you that the members there asked extremely intelligent questions. They were very engaged. So this whole sort of a bullshit narrative that Stephen Greenstreet and Kirkpatrick are trying to spin, that all of this is a bunch of senators and congressmen and women are just simply being snowed under. That is not reality. Kirkpatrick and Greenstreet and these debunkers are completely disconnected from reality. They do not know what they're talking about. And I can tell you for sure that this meeting went very, very well. And I would suspect that there will be others for sure. So it looks like the lights went back out on our friend Frank. So we're definitely going to have both of you back on, hopefully with better internet, or maybe I'll have to find out when Ronald Moultrie is on one of his days off, playing golf or I don't know, going to Taco Bell or whatever, and not messing with our internet. There he is. He's back now. So I actually, from a friend that we would all recognize, who will remain nameless, just sent an article that just came out by Baptiste Friscourt, from probably saying it wrong. Congressman hint at secret UAP push post briefing with Lou Elizondo. And I'm reading this right off of the website here. It is sentinelnews.substack.com/p/congressman hint at secret UAP. And I'll read a bit of it here. A journalist and adjunct professor Matt Laszlo, love him. He's doing great work as well. He's fantastic. He's what a great journalist. Has recently scoured the halls of Congress interviewing elected officials. Representative Ralph Norman, while leaving a classified briefing in a skiff, confirmed talking with Lou Elizondo, former ATIP director, interviewed by Askapol. He declared about him, quote, "I'm going to bring him back," he emphasized. Quote, "We've got a real problem. This isn't playland." Hear that, Kirkpatrick? It says in Playland, he told us about the facts of the matter, about what is happening, and that was concerning. Representative Norman also considered Lou Elizondo, quote, an expert combat veteran, very qualified, and I could not agree more, who has been doing this for some 30-something years. Intriguingly, he added, we're just going to be unprepared and just take it this isn't political. Let's see, I'm just skimming through here. So according to Representative Norman, Lou Elizondo, which you were just touching on, Dave, here a second ago, showed slides and was accompanied by 2 pilots and a scientist. He added, quote, a combat pilot that has flown missions and reported what he saw also took pictures of UAP. One might wonder what these pictures and slides could show, given that they were presented in an unclassified setting. Norman concluded, quote, couldn't decipher everything. It's up to me to get those who can decipher to walk us through it. He concluded by stating that Lou Elizondo did a hell of a job. Cryptically, Representative Burleson declared, quote, I've got something up my sleeve. I don't want to talk about it. I'll keep you informed because I got a big thing that I'm going to announce regarding UAP. This is from Representative Burleson, Republican Representative Burleson. Article goes on, Baptiste says here, Burleson's secret project may well be fueled by the frustration he suffered when trying to organize a classified briefing with David Grusch. He told Matt Laszlo, quote, it's crazy that we can have him in a public hearing, but to get him back into a skiff seems insurmountable. Yeah, it's just crazy. Frank, do you think those are shenanigans that they're playing? We'll stop in the article here and get your insight.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, presumably you can hear me, by the way, just to check first of all.
Yes, yeah. loud and clear. Moultrie's on lunch break. You're good for a bit.
Okay, well, we're doing okay, and I think yeah, that's essentially.
We're losing you, Frank. I'm so sorry. There he goes again.
I'm starting to get quite offended here. I'm getting quite offended. The IC don't see me as a threat, did he? Clearly.
Yeah. It's it is a good thing that you came on the show today. Otherwise, this just would have been 1 2-hour monologue of me ranting. So thanks for coming on. So sorry, Frank keeps dropping out on his connection.
Tell you what, I've worked with Frank for a long time now, and he never has any problems like that. So. He always good connections. He's got good gear, so it's very interesting. Well, who knows? But it doesn't happen from somebody who works with him all the time. So yeah, interesting. But that article it's basically the same one we were talking about. But you start to see how you can still hear me, I presume, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm here.
I was just getting a bit paranoid there myself. But you can start to see how all the different things are building up. The hearings in the skiff, what happened after the skiff, the thing with the IGIC and the things again in the skiff. And they're playing a very dangerous game, keep rubbing these politicians' noses in it. And that Burleson, he's not stopped talking about it since he come out of there. So they're all on the case. So I don't think this can carry on too much longer. The pressure is really building. And I wonder at some point, is this core secrecy group going to wish they took the UAP transparency escape route that they were being offered, of the act, because it might get quite messy for them, because Luna in this article is talking about field hearings as well, which he said a few times. Now, everybody was laughing down their sleeves about that, in the establishment, but they could be quite powerful, I think, if they control the agenda and have the witnesses, and they will make a splash because the press turn up for these hearings. That is the thing as well. The press do turn up. I mean, and Matt Laszlo's been doing fantastic work. Absolutely.
He has, yeah. Yeah, he's amazing. We've had him on a couple times on the show, and he's always welcome here to talk about his work. Another guy, please support him. Reporters don't make a ton of money, and this guy is busting his butt to get us this info, and the least we can do is certainly support his efforts on Patreon, I think, or wherever he's at. So here, I'll read a little bit more. let's see. Indeed, during the hearings, David Grusch's answers were often limited by vow of protecting U.S. classified information. Let's see. Representative Burleson went on and declared to Matt Laszlo, quote, there are certain locations that they've provided that we can certainly look into. That's what I'm looking forward to, even though it's not going to be easy to get access. Representative Nancy Mace got the same out of the classified briefing, declaring, quote, I would say David Grusch determined to be credible on some of the things that we discussed today. Regarding a possible upcoming hearing, she said, quote, I think that the private contractors should be on that witness list. I won't name names, but we have a better sense of who they might be. And yeah, these contractors, some dirty SOBs. So yeah, they need to be called on the carpet. So one of the things that we talked about in the Daily Mail article, if anyone has not read this Daily Mail article by Josh Boswell, Christopher Sharp, and myself, just search on Google for UFO plus Daily Mail plus CIA. And in that article, which all of us researched and cross-checked in all our sources in DOD and IC and other places, this thing was extremely heavily vetted before this thing saw the light of day. But one of the things that we discovered in the course of this thing, well, two things. One, there is a system in place that is probably under the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency that in real time can track these UAPs all across the world and can detect when they crash. The Office of Global Access, which is a super secretive program in the CIA, I believe it is under the Directorate of Science and Technology, they then farm out this crash retrieval operation to either Joint Special Operations Command, or they farm it out directly to the aerospace contractor. The aerospace contractor has a security contractor like a Blackwater or whatever that are former Tier 1 operators, Navy SEALs or whatever. Contractor sends their security team out to go and recover this craft. They take it back to Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, to do whatever they're gonna do with here. But one of the things that all three of us were not able to determine was who decided what the government retrieved, JSOC in particular, being supervised by the Office of Global Access, how that decision was made. Either was it going to be JSOC that recovered the object, the vehicle, or was it going to be farmed out to Northrop Grumman or one of these contractors, which of course leads to the question of who's got oversight of any of this, which Congress does not, because they are illegally hiding it from Congress. So I think what they're talking about here really touches on that, and I would imagine that Elizondo and these others probably backed up what we said in the Daily Mail article, would be my guess. I don't know that for a fact, but if that's the sort of comment that they're making, that leads me to believe that these congressmen and women are well aware of the dirty tricks that the CIA Office of Global Access has been up to for decades. Actually, not decades, they haven't been around too terribly long. And what these security contractors are probably illegally, not security, aerospace contractors are probably illegally doing. Frank, we're going to hand it back to you again. Hopefully the internet's going to stick up. Are you optimistic after hearing these comments from the people that were present for this briefing with Lou Elizondo and others?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite optimistic about particular leads this year. How can you hear me, by the way? Just to check.
Yes, yeah, you're good.
Oh, we're doing okay.
You're doing okay.
And yeah, I think it's, funnily enough, it's something that that Dave and I have been talking about in our sort of like offline conversations recently, about how all of these various three-letter agencies and all of the sort of stakeholders, I guess you could say, who are involved in some way with crash retrievals and reverse engineering, how that structure actually looks. And I think, again, very important work that you did alongside Chris and Josh with the CIA's involvement there. And if you think about the way that the actual structure of the network would have to work, if you've got a kind of, a carved out, if you will, legacy crash retrieval and reverse engineering program within kind of outside of Oversight, sort of with input from various different places. Obviously, the suspicion is the CIA, Department of Energy have got sort of fingers in that pie as well, and the DoD as well. You would also have to, you would have to have a kind of wider network as well. And I think we're starting to get a picture now as to how that wider network actually looks. Because if you think about it, you would have to, the CIA would have to have various, kind of carved out aspects of that organization. Because as we know from various people, and if anybody's looked into the capabilities of what the CIA have in terms of classified sensors on satellites and things like that, they would have to have a way of controlling the flow of that information so that it only goes to the people within other organizations that they want it to go to. And you would have to have the same sort of thing within NASA as well. And obviously we talk a lot about how the legacy programs would have to exist in a kind of outside of Christopher Mellon has described these universes, the energy and the intelligence community, and you would have kind of wider structure encompassing things like NASA as well, and potentially the same kind of thing as where presidents don't necessarily get read into the full picture of what's going on. You could potentially have the same thing within NASA as well, where even the head honcho at NASA doesn't really know about some of these kind of shadowy aspects of NASA that are behind the scenes communicating with all the other shadowy carved out aspects of various other agencies as well. And that network, I think, is starting to come to light, and more information on that has been coming out gradually over the last few years. And again, as I say, partly due to the work of investigative journalism that you yourself have been involved with. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over this year and coming years as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if any members of Congress are watching, we know that we have fans on Capitol Hill. I would encourage you to ask about the Office of Global Access. And I would also encourage you to ask to view an intelligence product called Talon Thrasher, that we'll just say holds a lot of historical data on what has been floating around in the air, both prosaic and non-prosaic. Ask about that. Just ask. I think you'll probably be very surprised at what they may not want to give you access to that, in particular, that data fusion product, intelligence product, Talon Thrasher. Let's do some questions here. We've got a couple of questions. We'll give this to Dave from Christian Morales. Gallagher stepped down, my boy here. Actually, maybe Frank. Gallagher stepped down, my boy here, Frank. Reported Gallagher was the less paid by defense contractors. How about that? I'm not sure what that means. Does that make any sense? Frank?
I can't understand that. I probably just got a bit chopped up in the text as he typed it, so you might want to type it again, and so we might move on.
Yeah. We'll move on to another question here. Go ahead.
If we're talking about sort of like certain political figures who perhaps aren't on the receiving end of funding from defence contractors, are being elbowed out of the picture, very concerning if that is the case. Not entirely unexpected, and I think what again, I could be wrong, but I think what he's trying to get at there is that we're going to see, quite cushy outcomes for who.
Moultrie up to his game. There we go. Oh, okay. Oh man, I am so sorry, Frank. You've been dropping in and out. We're going to have you back on the show, and with the lights on and the internet working. It's interesting too, Dave, when all of us that work in this space have contacts everywhere, most of which cannot go on the record lest they get fired or whatnot. But most of the time you get information from folks, and some things clearly they can't talk about because it's something classified. I don't know any classified information. I never want any classified information. But I can tell you, when I was helping out on that article, and sources that I'd spoken to that were pretty open, as soon as I mentioned Office of Global Access, CIA Office of Global Access, zip. That was it was not to be discussed. It was pretty clear.
I think you got pretty close to the heart of the beast with that OGA article, because I think that's got all the different elements. They clearly, for me, it's a combination of the IC, the DOE, US Air Force, and they've had these core groups since the war who are coordinating. And interestingly, the setup in the NDAA Act to actually try and discover UFOs is probably the same as what they've got, different people liaising in all these different all the different units. So it's quite interesting to see that being replicated. So I think you sort of discovered that OGA in Cobs-a-Lot, and I think they've got links to NORAD and all the rest of it. Clearly they've got tech to bring these things down. So and this has been going on for such a long time, and that was why I think you got so much flack for that story. But I think on the contractors, it'll all come in the end. They need these contractors. The America's got a history of using contractors to do its defence procurement and its development. So I think all this about eminent domain, I think it'll just be a deal in the end. They'll all do a deal because there'll be too many court cases, and they'll come on an agreement and do a partnership thing and move forward. I don't think it's the big thing that everybody says. Everybody will just have to get compensation behind the scenes or whatever, and they'll just have to move forward. But the key thing is that I think the IC, people underestimate how much control it's got. It controls all the signals, the radar, everything, and that's why it's able to exercise such power. On Balloon Gate, as it were, showed everybody they turned most of the stuff off and nobody realised. Right. It was all turned off, and that was a great embarrassment, wasn't it? But I think the OGA one was I think they weren't expecting you to bring that out, and I think that
no,
was
they weren't.
right there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm blanking on the gentleman's name right now, but another recommendation to members of Congress would be to look into the initial leadership that formed the CIA Office of Global Access and ask them what kind of operations they were up to. And I think that I'm going to be really surprised at all of the crazy bullshit that went on. And I would say to the contractors as well. Obviously for national security, our defense contractors, and I'm sure it is the same way in the UK, are absolutely vital. And they're going to do what their customer, the United States government, tells them to do. So we know that if the CIA, and we'll just say a rogue element of Joint Special Operations Command is doing some highly illegal shit and telling their contractors to do highly illegal shit, if I were the contractor, I would divest themselves of the technology, wash their hands, and come clean to Congress and say, this is what we were told to do. Reconciliation, especially from the American people, and I'm sure it's the same with our friends across the pond. People are very, very understanding. So if these contractors come through and say, look, this is what the CIA Office of Global Access told us to do. These were the crazy shit that a rogue element of JSOC Tier 1 operators were doing. It's better to come clean now. The longer that OGA, CIA, all of the what we were basically told is the entire UAP portfolio is under CIA. The entire thing. It's spread out across multiple nodes, DOE and other elements, but it is under their purview, and they got to be held to account. And one thing that we have continued to message on is that this is an oversight issue. You cannot have a functioning democracy when you've got a group of 50 or so senior executive service level career government people. Moultrie's getting pissed off there. You knocked him off the air again. But you can't have a functioning democracy if you're not telling the president about what is going on. He cannot administer foreign policy if he doesn't know exactly what's going on. Congress cannot make effective law if they are being lied to by the CIA and others. It's just democracy can't work that way. It just can't. Anyway, Frank, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, let Frank go.
Frank, while we got your internet, you were going to say something, I believe.
I can't really remember now, to be honest. It's been that long
okay.
trying to battle to get back in the room. What was I?
You've been fighting all. Actually, let me throw another question to you. Maybe this is more for me. This is from Ebenezer Geezer. Matt, was it a legitimate governmental briefing or a presentation at a political breakfast event? It was not a legitimate governmental briefing. That is for sure. So. Anyway, there you go. So a couple people in the chat here they're so impressed with what you guys have had to say and your such thinking behind it, hence the UFO Thinker podcast. How can folks find you on whatever platform you're on? Where do they find you?
So.
Oh man, this has been a freaking technical nightmare. Poor Frank. I feel bad for him, but Dave, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, well, you might not be so glad because I'm not great on all the names. So, but basically, if you go on you there, Frank?
Being able to.
We will be sure to put the links up in the YouTube description. I think if you search on Apple Podcast, Spotify, I don't know what other platforms you're on, but man, I just love your show. Such a great show. And all you guys on the UK are really doing great work. Vinnie Adams, what you guys are up to, Chris Sharp. We are, of course, fans of Spaced Out Radio, our Canadian friends. But yeah, I'll tell you one other interesting interference story. So kind of when all this stuff started happening and when all the weird shit started showing up above my house, I had finally reached out to Robert Hastings. I was floored that he returned my email and wanted to talk. And so I think that first conversation with Robert Hastings, who of course wrote UFO and Nukes, it's probably like a 4-hour conversation. The following day, and I had no issues prior to this, I was on my cell phone, I was having clicking, I was having echoing, all this like weird stuff. And so the following day, I tell Robert this. I'm like, man, this is what's been going on with my phone. And he just starts laughing. He goes, "That's the boys back east." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, literally everybody that I talked to, in particular U.S. Air Force personnel, they're with the nuclear angle, all have phone issues, emails getting deleted magically, voicemails going away, all kinds of crazy stuff. And Robert, in a recent interview with Whitley Strieber, which I recommend everyone listen to, a really great interview with Robert, said that all of this continues to this day. So the boys back east don't like what we're talking about, and you know what? We live in a democracy. No. We get to be critical of our government. Go ahead, Dave.
I mean, MUFON got done recently, didn't they? All the records tapped or hacked or whatever. And they were saying pointedly, it come from a user in the East USA, which they must have meant Langley, mustn't they, or somewhere like that anyway. Certainly, or Washington, somewhere anyway, some agency. So yeah, it just shows you it's quite rife, but it is. It's crazy, really. But you can. It's a bit like King Canute, isn't it? You can't hold the waves back forever. I mean, and it's again the whack-a-mole syndrome, isn't it? I mean, they might all be sitting laughing and everything, but it's not. The tide of history is against them, really. And I think the real reason is because their own people have decided that there needs to be some accountability. There's issues around developing this stuff, and there may well be something we don't know about, but they think needs to be discussed. Because this lot in the bunker seem to think, don't say anything, I hope it'll all go away. But they may think that this needs to be a legitimate, wider discussion in society, both scientifically, socially, and they're not prepared to put up with this anymore. It must be pretty significant for these people, career professionals, to decide that they need to force the issue. It never happens normally, and particularly not on this issue. And so I think, they won't be able to hold it back. And this is what we're waiting for at the moment. What's going to happen next? Because we've got all these old big things waiting to go. It's like being at the very top of a roller coaster and just waiting for it to go. And I think in the next couple of months, we'll see when the Grusch thing comes out, and then maybe Lou's book or a couple of other things, and the stuff that Congress people are doing. It'll be interesting to see how beleaguered the forces are, and if they'll have time to start knocking off everybody's internet connections, or they might have more significant issues to deal with.
Yeah, but Frank, maybe what we'll do is we'll get you Elon Musk's Starlink thing. I heard Moultrie can't jack with that. So maybe that'll be. I feel for you, man. I really appreciate your patience, and we're definitely gonna have you guys back on again. This is other than no internet 90% of the time. It's been a really great show, and I would say to Kirkpatrick and the CIA or whoever is jacking with us, you can kiss my ass. So. Fuck you guys. Anyway, and the ship you wrote in on. Sorry, my inside voice coming through. There you go. So Frank and Dave, I really appreciate you guys coming on. You're doing such great work. This is a team effort. As I told many people, we need more content creators like yourself that are putting out good, honest information about this topic that isn't sensationalized. People need to know that they can go and they can get the full skinny, because they're sure as hell not going to get it from the Pentagon, and they sure as hell are not going to get it from a quadcopter, and they sure are not going to get it from the debunkers. That is for sure. And debunkers are different than skeptics. It's good to be skeptical, not believe everything you're told, but when you operate from a place of trying to control the information due to your fanatical views, or whoever is funding you to put those fanatical views out there, it's un-American, it's wrong. Propaganda works, unfortunately, and So, but anyway, thanks guys for coming on. So, coming up next week, we've got, boy, I'm still tongue-tied from my little rant there. We have theologian Paul Thigpen, who will be joining us. He spoke extensively at the Soul Foundation about the religious aspects and implications. He'll be on this coming Saturday. He's a church Sunday, I would imagine. Saturday, same time, 12 noon. And we've got some other great guests coming up. And all I have to say is, and I told my wife this, I'm ready to go to the UK soon and visit in person my real friends. I don't drink, but I'll have a milk or something with you guys. And man, just keep up the great work, and hang tough. And I hope the internet starts to work after this show wraps.
Frank, do you want to say anything, mate? I'm just seeing if you're still there.
I'll try my best. Just thanks very much, Matt. And again, real apologies to anybody who's been inconvenienced by the technical problems there. I think at least the first hour we had a relatively smooth run, and then the NSA tools must have kicked in. Obviously, I am joking about that. But as I say, thanks for having us on. Really appreciate appreciate it, and the technicals. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been an entertaining show for sure. And
Matt, I'd just like to say, Matt, what you're doing, this news format and the thing you brought has been a real good thing for the community. And I watched it from the start because we need that sort of coverage. We need the links to the political thing. It's treating it as a serious topic. What we try and do, and certainly Frank's been doing it longer than I have, we try to make sense and analyse the facts so people can get hold of them, do some work with them, give some things people to think about, but give a sensible sort of analysis to move it forward, because this is what that's all about. And as you say, people won't get it elsewhere. And it's the power of the new media now that we're able to do that. 30 years ago, we would have had no chance, but now we have. And that's what this is all about, like what you're doing, other people, it's so important. And I think as a community, we need to focus on what Grusch is saying those things, and like a dog with a bone, keep on that aspect of it. We can't say, oh, we don't know what it is, start from scratch. We now got a pretty good testament, it's pretty well vested, verified. Let's go for that and push the envelope on that. That's what I think anyway.
I really appreciate that. Oh, and I know what I was gonna mention earlier, because I've seen it on Twitter. I sense a general frustration that the David Grusch op-ed is out. And I think all of us have been very eager to see this thing. And what I would say to everyone that's frustrated with it is, it's not out for a good reason. It is either, my guess, and I have no firsthand knowledge of it, it's either a legal issue with Dopser, or there is some good reason that it is not out. I am 100% certain that it is not because of Dave's wishes. I'm going out on a limb, but I guarantee you it is not out due to reasons that are beyond Dave's control. And again, as much as people will go on Twitter and say, just, screw your security oath and tell us everything. People have families to worry about. They have their retirement to worry about, and they have to worry about saying the wrong thing and going to jail. And people like Elizondo and Grusch and people that have put their asses on the line to put this thing out in a thankless way, in many ways, they got themselves and their family to worry about. Family comes first. So we gotta give them some appreciation and some understanding, and just be appreciative that they even came to the table to tell the American public, because they knew it was the right thing to do. So enough of that. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us, and we will be back again Saturday. Probably tomorrow or Tuesday, we'll have our little op-ed to talk about the debunkers and the history of the CIA manipulating American media, and kind of my thoughts on that. But our next interview, again, will be with Professor Dr. Paul Thigpen on Saturday at 12 noon. Guys, we'll see you soon. Frank, best of luck on the internet. And Dave, thank you for coming. And I have to say, I really appreciate you guys came dressed up to the nines for this event. You've got your tie on, you've got your jacket on. You guys are the best.
Well, I dress like this for breakfast, and so was Frank. This is what we're always like. We need to dress down for the show.
Like I said, you guys are my British brothers from another mother. So anyway, thanks a bunch, guys, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Please give these gentlemen a follow on Twitter. Information will be on there. Follow their podcast. And same for us. We always appreciate a follow, a comment, all that kind of stuff. We're on all the major social media platforms. Frank is dropping out, so I better stop while we're ahead. Anyway, thanks, guys, and chat soon.
Thanks, Matt.